I went to the conference at Amazon. I was like, no one's building Baymax. No one's building that future in mind. And that's when I felt like, arrogantly as most founders are, I've got to go build this.
Grace, coffee, tea, or something else? What fuels your mornings?
Coffee at the moment, but that's a new staple to my morning routine. 6 months ago, I didn't drink any coffee, but now I do.
Really? What was it before? Tea or just straight to work?
Just straight to work. But then I noticed after closing Series A, moving to SF, company growing, I just didn't have enough energy in my day, so I started having mochas. So
Ah,
a double shot mocha here.
love it. Okay. When you were a kid, what did you think you'd grow up to be?
Oh, I love this question because I was very clear. I think I was very clear on what I wanted to be. I wanted to be a fairy mermaid mathematician princess.
Okay, wow. Break that one down for me. I've never heard that one before. A
Yeah, it
fairy
was
princess mathematician. What?
mermaid.
Mermaid,
Mermaid.
sorry. Okay.
Yes. So I love like the Ariel was my favorite princess because she was the only
Mhm.
hybrid princess that was like human and a mermaid. When I was a
Yeah,
kid, I mean, now we've got Princess and the Frog, who was like
right.
Princess and a Frog. But anyways, so I love the fact that she was a mermaid. I love that like I'm half Chinese and half Australian, and so I've always considered myself like quite like I'm a mix. And
Yeah,
so I like that as well in terms of just like princesses. But then I also really loved math, so I also wanted to grow up and be a mathematician. But I also love mythical creatures and fairy and magic. So that was always really clear to me. I never had the struggle which is I feel like such a privilege, is of not knowing what I wanted to do. Like it was always really clear to me from even when I was 4. I was like, this is what I'm going to be. This is what I'm going to become. Very type A for a long time.
I love that. Okay, very cool. Haven't heard that one before. Haven't heard that one before. That's a fair. What's one technology that you can't live without?
Oh, one technology that I can't live without. I like these icebreakers. I've recently been very obsessed with, like everyone in Silicon Valley, building my own agents. So I guess like Claude Code is something today I can't live without. I'm building my own, like I'm building like a digital twin of my own brain at the moment,
Mm,
and all of Claude Code is really helping me put all of that together. And so I have like a fleet of agents that are like for every layer of my brain. There's like 4 layers to the brain. There's like the perceiving layer, the knowledge layer, the thinking layer, and the acting layer. And I've got agents acting in each of these layers for me. So that's probably what I'm really
it's
obsessed with at the
awesome.
moment. Yeah.
How much time have you spent building those?
Oh, I should really track it, but I don't.
Yeah,
Pretty much every moment that I'm awake, I'm kind of, if I'm not working and doing something else, I'm building my agents. It's like
very
time just
cool.
goes by. Like the last 3 weekends, I've just been vibe coding and working on my agents. And, I actually rush through my day work at the moment, like to get to building my agents. But my
Yeah.
agents are starting to, like, I'd say in the last week, I look at agents as kind of like interns. Like they need a lot of hand holding and a lot of really clear direction to have really
Mm,
high quality output. But in the last week was the first time where my agent started doing a lot of the administrative things and things on my behalf that actually freed up so much time for me that
very
like the
cool.
last week I've spent a lot of my time like really just thinking. And my job right now, a lot of it is just thinking like architecturally, how does this work? What should we need to do? And I actually got tired from thinking last week, which has never happened before because I'm always doing so many things to get that
Right.
done, to get to the thinking stage. And so usually when I'm at the gym, I'm also thinking through things like from systems perspective and architecturally of like problems in the business or the tech stack. And I noticed when I went to the gym this week, I didn't want to think. I was like, I need to stop thinking. I've spent so much time thinking this week. So that's how I know my agents are getting to the level that I want them to be. And there's still so much room to go. But yeah, I spend a lot of time on my agents.
That's awesome. Okay, cool. You've inspired me. I have to start. I'm like teetering around the edge. I just need to do what you do and spend the weekends building it out. Seems like it's a
Mm.
compounding effort. Um,
It is. It is. We're doing a whole like I'm pushing it through my whole team because I want everyone in my team, like not just my engineers. My engineers are really good at it. Well, some of them are still a little bit apprehensive to adopting these tools, but I want even my ops team, if you're non-technical, to really understand. I think that's probably one of the I don't know if it's the biggest pain point in the business at the moment, but I want my like everyone in my team to be as like AI adoptive and fluent as I am right now. At least that's what I'm working towards. So I don't know how
nice.
other startups are doing it because we have so much that we need to do, but yeah.
Yeah, I've heard, people are just having like really hard rules and stuff like that with it and kind of forcing and pushing people, but I don't know. We'll see in time. But yeah, that's that's very inspirational and powerful, especially if it's moving the needle for you. Last icebreaker before we get into this. If you could fast forward 10 years, and this is a great one, I've been wanting to ask you this one. If you can fast forward 10 years and see one impact that your work has made on the world, what would you want that to be?
That's a really good question.
Similar to like the question that you asked me at the start of what I wanted to become when I grew up, which I said was a fairy mermaid princess mathematician. A lot of those aspirations came from me as a child watching all of these characters and from all these movies and animated films, like wanting to be like Ariel, who's like a mermaid who was both under the sea and on land, or like Tinkerbell, who had like, who could fly and had all these like magical abilities. Like I created a really deep emotional attachment and connection to all of these like fictional animated characters. And so the impact that I would like to see is that robotic characters and all of the billions of robots that are one day going to be coexisting alongside humans, that we can build deep and rich relationships with them as well. So that's the kind of impact that I'd like to make, because I truly believe that robotics can have a really, really meaningful impact and change on people's quality of life. It doesn't have to be the scary, like sci-fi Terminator-esque future that people imagine when they think about humanoid robots. Robots can be really actually meaningful for people. And that's the impact I like to see, and why I started Andromeda, really.
Awesome. Welcome to Machine Minds, everyone. I'm your host, Greg Tarusian, founder of Samson Rose, your robotics talent search partner. And on today's episode, I'm joined by Grace Brown, CEO and founder of Andromeda Robotics. Thanks for being on the show today, Grace.
No, thanks for having me. Are those icebreakers, like, do you put them in the episode, or is that like just to...
No, I put them in. Yeah. They're in there now. That's how we're kicking it off.
I love that. I love that. It makes you really comfortable.
Good. I'm glad it worked. Let's jump into the meat of the show now. I like to usually start with, the earlier days, and because you've taken a pretty bold path into robotics at a relatively young age of people looking at founding companies, etc. The stereotypical. What pulled you into this space in the first place? Like what drew you to becoming this entrepreneur in robotics specifically?
Well, kind of like your very first question, like I always knew that I wanted to end up in STEM. Like I knew I really loved maths. I really loved physics. I just had, from a young age, I had this really strong affinity towards like the STEM field. So I knew that this was kind of the industry that I'd be working in. And in 10th grade, I was really fortunate. I went to a really, really good high school, and they taught us engineering, and that introduced me to coding and systems thinking and working on like projects that you'd have to build different robotic systems in a workshop. So I knew from that subject after 10th grade that I was going to be an engineer. Like it was like just discovering this part of you that was so clear. So I knew like pretty much from 15 years old that this was going to be the path, and this was going to be what I dedicate my life to. I didn't know exactly what that would look like. I didn't know I would be building humanoid robots. I just knew I really loved solving complex technical problems and building things that like, the closest thing to real life magic to me is engineering, because you're imagining something that previously didn't exist, and then you're creating it from, just like these materials that are around you to solve problems in the real world. So to me, that's like the closest thing to real life magic. I mean, my favorite quote is from Arthur Clarke, who said that any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. So it's the same thing. So that's when it was, from then it was really, really clear that this was my path.
Love that. Was there a specific moment where you thought, I'm going to build this company instead of just go and work for one?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in Melbourne, Australia, and I was working in Australia's like space tech ecosystem before I started my company while I was studying. So I worked at a few different space startups. My co-founder as well, he was in the space industry. It's partly why we named our company Andromeda, after the galaxy, which was a sentiment to the where we'd started our careers. But I think I knew, like, Melbourne really didn't have a lot at the frontier of tech, and even though we were in the space industry, like we knew, like to even launch at the time, to launch a satellite was unbelievably expensive. To build anything like that you'd put into space was just an unbelievably complex challenge that required a huge amount of resources. And so for us, we knew that we wanted to start something that for us, the way I see Andromeda is very similar to like almost like Bell Labs. I know Bell Labs didn't work out commercially all that well, so I don't want to reference them too much. But it
Yeah.
was like a place where you could build the most cutting edge frontier tech that would really change life on Earth. And so for us, like starting Andromeda was really the pathway to really building our own sort of Bell Labs, or like the Disneyland for engineers is what I'd like to describe, but with more
Mm,
commercial success than them.
yes. Okay. We got to emphasize that.
Yeah.
On this journey, what's been harder than you expected about being a founder?
Um, well, I started my career as an engineer, and so I thought starting a robotics company meant that I'd be building robotic systems for the rest of my life, and that's just that's just not true at all. So I think I when I started the company, I had this real identity shift from being an engineer to being a founder, and I know there's a lot of um, there's a lot of like evangelistic like connotations to being a founder, but I didn't actually see that when I started the company. I All I saw was me shifting from being a builder to being someone who'd run a company, which there were a lot of skills that I didn't really value as a technical engineer. And so I think that identity shift was really, really hard for me, like for not writing all of the code in Abby, for not building, assembling all of her different subsystems. Like that was really difficult to make that adjustment on a personal perspective and a personal level. Yeah, I'd say that's been the hardest thing for me since starting.
Yeah, that's like very self-aware. Have you ever read or listened to the E Myth?
I've heard of the
It's a
book,
bit,
but no, I haven't read it yet.
yeah, you would love that. Just for that perspective of like going from an individual engineer up to a founder. I mean, you could plug in whatever. It doesn't have to be an engineer, but it's that transition to being a real entrepreneur of going from like the technician phase up to the entrepreneur level. But yeah, I don't want to dwell on it too much, but it's really good book.
Okay, I'll add it to my list.
All right. So for people hearing about Andromeda for the first time, what are you guys building and what problem have you set out to solve?
So we're building Abby. Abby is a social companion robot that goes into healthcare facilities like aged care homes to interact with people and to really be their best friend and a companion. So she's fully voice interactive. She speaks up to 90 different languages. She does a lot of different activities with you, and she was designed to address and alleviate loneliness for people who don't have the same opportunity for meaningful social interaction in their day to day life. So that's why she was built. Yeah.
She's a very cool, really fun robot. I've seen her a few times at conferences and stuff, and I follow you guys like your announcements and progress. So it's been great watching this over the last few years.
Oh, that's so awesome. I didn't realize you've seen her in person. Like, you should
I
come up and say.
have. Yeah, no, where was it? I think it was the Robotics Summit last year, maybe, or yeah, in
Humanoid Summit,
Boston. I think you,
probably.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Um, why? I'm curious why you chose this category versus what most people end up in, something like industrial or logistics or something like that.
Mm-mm. Well, I think specifically because of what you just said, all of robotics has traditionally been in automation, building technologies that make things more productive, more efficient. Like the whole like robotics industry is really focused on those sorts of utility based tasks. And it was specifically because of that that I was like, but robotics can be so much more. Specifically in this era of robotics, with like the ubiquity and the advancements in LLMs, the lowering costs of hardware. Like you can now build robotic systems that people can build real emotional attachments to and real connections with. And so to me, it was like a whole untapped category in which robotics could really build in that no one seemed to be going after, but it was so obvious to me. Like when I
Yeah,
went into well, it was really obvious after COVID. So Abby started as like a COVID passion project for me. I was isolated and disconnected from the whole world during the COVID, like everyone was. But I was in Melbourne,
mm,
which had really, really strict lockdown. So I spent a period of like 4 or 5 months with no real interaction with another human being. So that's where the idea for Abby really started. And I recognized, like, COVID shined this massive light on like the loneliness epidemic, showing people that you could have all of your needs met from like just like a physiological perspective, like like food, education, exercise. But if you lacked meaningful connection and real social interaction, like there was this massive detriment and health impact to individuals. Like the World Health Organization showed that loneliness has greater health implications than smoking cigarettes. So
wow.
like it was really clear to me that robotics could really make a change in this whole sort of like category, but no one was going after it. I went to Amazon, one of Amazon's like humanoid summits or robotic summits, and I interacted with all of the humanoid robots that I'd seen in Time magazine and read about online, and I was so excited. I felt like a child in Disneyland. It was incredible. But when I was interacting with them, they were all cold and clinical, and they didn't have like this like social layer on top of them. Like they were from a capability perspective, unbelievably impressive. You know, like bipedal locomotion, the dexterity, able to lift things, but they didn't have this like layer that helped them effectively interact with people. Like I felt so disconnected from them. And to me, that was
Yeah.
just so obvious that this layer needed to be built. And so that's why I started Andromeda. Well, one of the many reasons why I started Andromeda and why we're doubling down on this. I don't want to call it a niche because it's not a niche, because the billions of robots in the world that are going to coexist alongside us will need exactly what we're building today. And this kind of like social layer that I'm always talking about.
Love that. Yeah, for anyone that isn't familiar with how locked down Australia, well, I have family in Sydney and Brisbane, and so I'm just lucky they were around other people because it was very, very strict, right? So that is a perfect birth story. You know,
Yeah.
a lot of people are skeptical about social robots, right? You mentioned earlier about like the Terminator stuff and all of that, like sci-fi and all the the bad side. But what do
Yeah.
you think general public or even just people in the space get wrong about this focus?
Well, the general public's perception of humanoid robots comes from, what they're fed, right? It's come from science fiction movies, it comes from like novels, it comes from, the scary kind of propaganda that they hear about robots taking your jobs, AI replacing people. Like that's where their perception comes from. And so it's understandable why people are so apprehensive of, adopting new technologies and humanoid robots, and have this apprehension towards social humanoid robots, because it's all that they know. And so for us, like as a company, one of the biggest challenges we've had, like, is the social adoption challenge. I think that's something that a lot of people underestimate. Is it's not just about building the capability within the robot, but it's actually about solving the social adoption challenge amongst, the industry and the market that you're in. And that was also partly why I started Andromeda, because everyone was just feeding into this narrative. Like if you look at all the humanoid robots in market today, they follow the narrative from like science fiction of these like 10-foot tall, faceless, militant robots that they claim to want to be building these general purpose humanoid robots for the home, but I can't see people wanting to adopt these systems for their children, their parents, like everything. The thing that I think has done, like the thing that I think needs to be built is exactly what Disney and Pixar have been doing over the last century, which is creating these characters with dynamic personalities, with flaws and their own like preferences and opinions on different things that people build this connection to. And so that's for me, that's why I started building Abby. And I think, yeah, for us, even in the market that we're in, we spend a lot of time just focus on educating not just VCs who back us, but also like our customers, and trying to show them and demonstrate to them that Abby can add real value to their lives, and that is the misconception that science fiction has fed them.
Interesting. Where do you see, or can you share actually some of like the real world? Because you guys have had real world deployments and commercial successes. So all of these practical use cases versus, what's still hype in the space right
Mm.
now.
So yeah, so I'd say we have a few dozen deployments, mostly in the aged care industry in Australia at the moment, and they've been honestly like going really, really well. As a business, like right now, we're doing like fleet management, like with all the dozen of deployments. Seeing which abbeys are down, which ones need repairs, how abbeys are being used. So that from a founder perspective is actually a lot of fun, and at least as far as I'm aware, I know a lot of the industry right now, they optimize for like demos. There's a lot of videos that you see of humanoid robots doing backflips and dances, and that's awesome, by the way. Like I watch these videos and I go, this is so fucking cool,
Yeah.
but there's a difference between building a humanoid robot for a demo and building a humanoid robot for a customer. And we've gone down the path where everything we build in Abby is really, really designed for our customer. And so, she's not doing backflips, but she's really optimized for building like a deep relationship with the residents that she's interacting with. There's a lot of things that go into that I think are overlooked, right? Like when you're interacting with people, it's so a lot of it is non-functional. It's all emotional. Like you need to read the room and understand the emotional state of the individual, like the voice prosody, the emotional
Mm.
rhythms, their patterns. And that's a really, really deep, complex and philosophical challenge that is quite different to like traditional robotics, where it's very binary of, did the humanoid robot pick up the box and put it in its designated location or not. So yeah, so I'd say we've gone down this path where we know Abby works really well for our customers. We've had a customer voice in the loop from day one. We deployed her when she was really a really early prototype, and that's given us a lot of advantages in terms of making her a really sticky product in the aged care industry today.
That. How do you think about trust between like humans and machines? Because to your point, public are just, they react to what they're fed, and that's a whole other ball game. Like trying to undo so much time,
Yes.
movies and skepticism and all of that stuff. How do you work through that?
So everything we've built in Abby is about optimizing for trust, right? And one of the primary things is like the design philosophy. So as I've alluded to many times now already in this podcast alone, is Abby was very much meant to be like a Pixar-like character brought to life. So like from her design, we made her 4 feet tall. So she's like the size of like a young child. So she's anthropomorphic. So she's got arms and legs and she mimics human movement. She's got these beautiful oversized purple eyes to make her more endearing and non-threatening. And everything that the way we've designed her is, people, like the most common response that we get from about Abby from residents is that they feel like she's like a granddaughter who's walking through the door. So
That's
and we
nice.
it is lovely, and
Yeah.
that was very much what we've optimized for. In fact, like there's even this one resident. I was in a home one time, and they didn't know I was the founder, and I was sitting in like the living room space with all the residents who were interacting with Abby, and I'd asked this lady next to me, I was like, what do you think about the robot up at the front there? And she snapped at me, and she was like, "Don't call her a robot. Her name's Abby." And to me, that was like success because
Love that.
they
Yeah.
don't, exactly, because they don't even see her as like a robot or even as a piece of technology, but they actually just see her as like this brought to life character. And so
Yeah.
for us, everything was about optimizing for that. And when people can start seeing the system as like a character, like they build so much more trust than seeing like all the humanoid robots people see as equipment or tools. That's what they are. They're tools. And Abby's not a tool. She's a character.
What do you think good human robot interaction actually looks like in the real world?
I think it looks exactly as I just described, where people forget about the technology and
Mm.
it transcends from thinking about the capability of the technological platform that they're interacting with, and it's just having a real authentic interaction with what they're talking to. So I
Yeah.
think, yeah, when they forget about the technology and start just having engaging interaction, I think that's what really good HRI is.
Yeah, that's like really turning that corner, and you can see how that would be difficult with some of these other products that you've mentioned, without naming names, but they fit the mold of the iRobot type
Mhm.
thing that could happen. But obviously, from seeing Abby and everything, you don't get that from her or the product. How much of this do you think you touched on, like design philosophy and stuff like that? But how much of this is like technical challenge versus design or psychological challenge, do you think?
I think it's an incredibly interdisciplinary challenge. Like it is a deep technical engineering challenge, but it's also a philosophical challenge, and it's why I believe you need to have all voices around the table when building, a product that's going to interact with people. Like we need
Yeah.
creative talent to be able to understand like the personality and the character bible of the robot that you're building, and then you need like you need like people who have healthcare backgrounds to really understand like the health implications of the product that you're building, and then you need the engineers to be able to actually implement all the systems from all of the different voices around the table. So for me, it's like it's such an interdisciplinary problem, um,
Mm.
and it's why from day one, like I really wanted to hire animators from really really early on. The challenge is you need to have like a platform that works first, right? So like for us, we needed to actually have a robot that does what it's meant to do when you turn it on, and having that platform in the first step is already a really much greater challenge than people think. Um, but yeah, but for us, like Andromeda's going to have like those would be the four pillars of Andromeda's talent. There's the technologists, which are like the engineers and the developers. There's going to be the creative talent, which are like the animators and the people who understand character design and development. There's going to be the healthcare pillar, where people have that health background, and then of course, like any company, you need your operators and your enablers to actually build the business.
Yeah, that's very, very intentional way of building a team, I think, especially when you know that all the implications and everything and where you want it to operate. So that's great. And on that, you're building in a space that doesn't fully have like this defined playbook yet, right? Like this is all new and you're approaching it in a new way. How do you make product decisions without like clear precedent or, a clear route to follow from someone else?
That's a good question. I feel like anyone building in the frontier is going to have that challenge. It's part of the appeal. You hire a
Mm,
team who are really attracted to solving problems that have never been solved before. I think for us as a business, a lot of our decisions have come from having that customer voice in the loop so early. Like I put Abby in market, I'd say, I think 2 years ago now. And that was really like a lot of deep tech companies will build for 5 years before they put their product in market. And so they build something that they hope that there's going to be a market for, and they hope that it's sticky. Whereas for
mm,
us, we put her into market while we were building her, which was a really intentional strategic decision because I wanted to get an understanding of how do people actually use Abby? How do they want to use her? What works, what doesn't? And there's been so many learnings that have come from that. So I think for us, a lot of our decisions have come from really observing that the psychology of how people interact with Abby, and it's not always from exactly what they tell you. Actually, more often than not, it's not from what they tell you, but it's from what you observe what the customers really need. So for example, we
mm,
noticed like with some customers were telling us that Abby's voice was either too fast or too slow. Well, actually, when we heard feedback from different customers, we realized the feedback was really scattered. Some people would say she's too, voice was too high, pitch was too high or too low. Some people said she talked too fast or too slow, or etc. And so we realized there wasn't a one size fits all approach. And
yeah,
every Abby who interacts with, and that's when we learned that every Abby needs to be personalized to the individual. Like for example, someone with a hearing aid needs Abby to speak at a lower pitch than someone without a hearing aid. And so there's all these
interesting.
different nuances. Yeah, exactly. And so that's how we've made a lot of product decisions to date, is by really just observing the psychology of that interaction and making those judgment decisions ourselves.
Yeah,
um, but it is, sometimes even now, like sometimes we're thinking about like the next generation Abby, and or the evolution of where Abby's going, and there's some real trade-offs of, do we go down path A or path B? One's safer, one's more like perhaps potentially more risky, but then, I guess for me, like what keeps me up at night is I don't want to make decisions where I feel like we're building like the tactile keyboards of like a BlackBerry while the industry is going towards like an iPhone touchscreen. Like that's what keeps me up. So
mm, yeah,
yeah,
I can see why.
yeah.
Obviously, hardware and AI is notoriously hard, right? How are you guys thinking about iteration speed and balancing staying competitive as well? Or, like these decisions that you're trying to make, like it has to be pretty unique balance.
Mm, mm. That's a good question. I mean, it goes back to even how one of the things you talked about at the start of the podcast, with your icebreaker of like, what AI tools can I not live without?
Mm,
I think definitely one thing I'm trying to get my team across right now is using more like agents in their workflow, like not just the engineers, but like the operators as well. I think with the tools that are available today, like you can build things so much faster. I mean, there's a lot of, even building Abby. We always say like with building Abby, there's like 100 startups inside Abby alone. There's like, this the sentiment analysis models. There's like all the tooling that you need to do for like the animation. There's like building the character Bible. There's like, the expressions of her. There's like, building our own batteries and the hardware. Like there's so many sub components of Abby that could be a whole startup on its own.
yeah,
And and to us, which makes, part of the whole like mission and journey of building her so exciting and so enthralling, because it is so, there's so many parts to her. But I think now with all these like agentic tooling things like Claude Code and everything that's available, you can build so much faster. And there's been so many of the first thing that we've done is so many of the internal tools that we have. We've started like rebuilding them and making them much more sophisticated so that we can do other things better. Like we have an app that you can use to interact with Abby. We call it Influencer. So you can see like chat logs, you can see, her behaviors, you can even like operate her if you want to actually manually control her. And that's one that we've given like a full rebuild for. We've got like this
Nice.
internal animation tooling platform, and we've rebuilt that, which means that now we can probably bring on animators much sooner so that they have like the tools or like the paintbrushes to be able to actually do the work that they need to do. So I think I don't know if that answers your question directly,
Yeah.
but that's some of the things that we're thinking about in terms of like staying competitive and staying ahead in building in this AI era.
It's exciting. Yeah. Yeah. Especially, a lot of people see the technology that's happening around them and see all of those advances, but they're so busy on what they're already doing, their product or the next milestone or whatever, that they can't slow down to speed up and like slow down, build what they need to internally that's going to help them move faster or create something in a better way or give people more access or even like enable the animators to come on sooner, right? Like they're all things that are so important, but if you don't take the time to do it and just keep going down like the road that you're on, the path that you're on, you kind of miss the window, really.
Yeah, exactly.
What do you think needs to happen in the next 3 to 5 years for humanoids to actually scale commercially?
I think what needs to happen in the next 3 to 5 years is that all of these robots that are being built today that are designed to exist and work alongside humans, whether it's in the homes, in the schools, and hospitals, they all need, going back to how we started the podcast, I feel like we're going full circle, which is great.
Yeah.
They need they need a layer of social awareness. They need to be able to, because interacting with humans is not like a binary functional thing. Like even if the robot is like doing your dishes, although I don't think humanoid robots will actually be at the sink doing dishes, you'll just have like a dishwasher that's like more automated. But like any robot that is designed to do work alongside a human will need to know how to interact with that human, even if it's in a warehouse. Like I know people say like, oh, but robots in warehouses won't need social awareness, and it's like, sure, you might think that they won't need it, but as soon as you bring a human into that environment, it needs to understand how to interact with them, and it needs some social intelligence. I mean, even like Waymos, for example, like a lot of people from the teams have said that they've recently turned down like the politeness of a Waymo because it used to follow the rules so rigidly that people wouldn't take Waymos because it would take you 40 minutes to get from A to
Yeah.
B when Uber could get you there in like 20 minutes. And so they've turned down the politeness where now like my Waymo just ran a yellow light last week. And I was like, this is awesome. Like it's starting to understand, you know? And so
Yeah.
that's probably like step one of like social intelligence and awareness. That's not really getting to the nuances of like humans, like emotional states and reactions, but at least it's starting to understand like we, as humans, we kind of have this social contract with each other, right? Like if you drive on a road, I'm just going to use autonomous vehicles as an example because that's where I think robots are most ubiquitous today, but like we have this social contract of understanding how people interact with each other on a road. And it slightly differs country to country, but we all have this social contract with each other. And right now, all the autonomous vehicle companies are building that social contract into their self-driving cars. And so, but it's going to be the same for any robotic system that's going to be in a home, in a school, in a hospital, in any environment that's coexisting with people. So that's what
Yeah.
we need for the unlock.
Interesting. Before we get onto last kind of topics here, because I'm conscious of time for you, and I know you're super busy, but I really want to talk about your team because that's one of, I think, I mean, obviously I'm biased because I'm in the recruiting world, but I think for early stage startups, especially when you're doing something at the forefront, frontier tech, etc., and a whole new playbook that you're creating, you've got to really find the right people. I'm curious what you look for in early hires for your team.
Well, I mean, in the early days when Andromeda started, to be quite candid, like we were a bunch of young, highly passionate 20-some-year-olds just wanting to build something that we delusionally thought that could, change the world, as every founder says and dreams.
Yeah.
And so I think in the early days, particularly if you're hiring people of younger talent or earlier in their career, you're really optimizing for potential. So really looking at not exactly what they've done, but their growth rate and why the question of why they want to join Andromeda, no matter actually whether they're early in their career or later in their career, is actually the most important question to me. Like, why do you want to work here? Most of the people we interview are highly competent and can get jobs and work placements like at any company, at any tech company, sometimes even like the big techs that could pay much higher than what we could pay them salary wise. So I really understand what is their motivator for wanting to join Andromeda, and what do they want to get out of, being part of this team beyond just a paycheck. So for us, that's probably the most important question that I look for. And there's no right or wrong answer. I just want to know what motivates them. And I think if there's alignment in why they believe in the mission that we're building, and how they see the future of this industry, and what they want to apply themselves to, if there's alignment there, then real magic can really happen within a team.
Yeah, agreed. Agreed. How do you balance like hiring deep specialists versus, people that are more adaptable generalists in a startup like this? Because I'm sure there's a space for both, but you probably weigh one heavier.
Well, yeah, depending on the stage of the startup as well. I'd say definitely earlier in a startup, which, you would definitely know this, you need more generalists because you do not have enough people to do all the things that need to be done. So all of my like founding engineers are very, very like I studied mechatronics, and mechatronics is like across like mechanical, electrical, software. And I always jokingly described it as the indecisive engineer because that's how I chose mechatronics. I had no idea which field I wanted to go into.
I like
But
that.
that actually really helped me as a founder because then I could actually build something like Abby because I understood each part of Abby deeply enough to make progress and build a prototype. And so most of my founding engineers have like an interdisciplinary engineering background. But I think as the company grows and as you start really building a product and start realizing the parts that you really need to double down on, then you start bringing in more domain specialists to really like beef up that subsystem of whatever it is that you're building. So different. There's values and even when you are a large company, I like to describe like the kind of generalists and the operators as like free electrons. Like you really need every company needs free electrons, like people who are going to take on those really random projects that come up but are really critical to the company and keeping the company moving. And so a
Yeah.
lot of the time those titles fall under like a chief of staff or an ops role. But those free electrons, you really need them in the team.
I
Yeah.
like that. Yeah. Good advice. Great advice.
Yeah.
What at this stage of the company, what makes someone successful on a team versus someone who might struggle coming into a company like this?
What makes someone successful and what would make someone struggle? I mean, even though we've come so far from where we were in day one, like just from day one, we were like five, like I said, 20 some year old
Hmm.
mechatronics engineers. And now we're like a team of over 80 across 2 countries. And like, even though we've grown so much, we're still so early. And every single person who joins Andromeda today, I still believe has such a massive outsized impact on the trajectory of our success. And so every person that we hire, I really look to see if they're going to take ownership in their role and to really kind of take that responsibility of recognizing that they're going to impact the like the path and the trajectory of Andromeda. Like we've grown so much but it's still so early. So I think for me, you'll be most successful if I can see that you're going to have that ownership in your role. And we actually optimize for that in our hiring process. We look for people, like some people hear that and go, holy shit, that's terrifying. I don't want that level of responsibility. But then other
Yeah.
people are like, yes, like that's exactly what I'm looking for. I'm looking for something where they know that their work is really going to move the needle for a company. And
Yeah.
so that at least definitely at this stage still, I think that's what is an early indicator of how successful they'll be in the role.
Some of the best formed teams that I've worked with have had interview processes that are similar. Like they almost try to scare people about the role, about the company. Like, are you
Yes,
sure you want to work here? Yeah.
yes, an
Yeah.
anti-sell. That is literally what I said
Yeah.
when I hired my chief people officer. I love that. I'm like, you need to do an anti-sell, right? Because
Yeah.
there's too many companies being like, you should join us for all of these benefits, and it's like,
Yeah. They just
no,
want to sell you. Yeah.
exactly. You need a filter to find the right people. And that's what I do. I do that with like particularly the top talent of like I'm always trying to understand like, are you sure you want to take this on right now? Because it is
Right.
not easy. You're gonna have to give more than you get, at least in particularly many nights and
Hmm.
a lot of times in the first few years, maybe even beyond that. Like it's an anti sell. I love an anti
Yeah.
sell. because that is how you get the right people on board. Because it is the hiring process should be a filter. It shouldn't be trying to like
For
optimize
sure.
the top of funnel and bring more in. You want to be able to like actually filter out the people who are actually truly hungry for the mission that you're on.
100%. And then most of those people, if you're finding the right people, aren't going to be just actively looking and trying to take the first thing and the only thing that they get offered, right? You really want to, like you said, anti-sell them. But it's almost painting a worse picture than it is, because when they come in and they're like now part of a team with like-minded people and working on something that they're passionate about and bought into from the get-go, it's like it doesn't feel like work. Caveat, it doesn't feel as bad as you've tried to sell it
Yeah.
and make it out to be. Now it's fun, it's engaging, it's something that they want to be working on, they want to be doing evenings and weekends, like they're passionate about it, and with people that are thinking about things the same way. So yeah, it's a really, really good filter.
Yeah.
What do you think? Obviously this category and then social robots and humanoids in general, hugely impactful, getting so much buzz right now, and in general it seems like the right time to be building and working this area. What do you think the risks are of getting the category wrong as an industry?
So I think like this wave of humanoid robots and home companion robots, like this, the wave of this technology is coming. Like
Mhm.
everyone's building towards it. It's where the future is going, and so I think that is inevitable. Like this whole industry is inevitable, and I think what we need to think about now is like who actually builds this future creates a really really different reality for for the future that we're going to live in. And so I get the question so often, like with people having misunderstandings of don't you feel terrible building humanoid robots that are replacing human care, or don't you feel terrible like building an industry or working in a building a category of robotics technology that is so frowned upon by majority of society. And to me it's like this technology is being built no matter what, and like unless you have companies who are building in this space that value building technologies that actually improve human life and quality of life, like you're going to have it's going to be a really different future. And that's what I saw when I went to the Amazon's conference. I was looking at, I had this in my mind, I had this imagination that the future of robotics was going to be like Big Hero 6, like Baymax from Big Hero 6, where they're going to be
Yeah.
companions for yourself that you interact with, that are there to really make sure your quality of life is taken care of. And then when I went to the conference at Amazon, I was like, oh my god, no one's building Baymax. No one's building that with with that future in mind. And that's when I felt like, as kind of like arrogantly as some most founders are, I was like, if no one's building this, like I've got to go build this. Like that's the future I want to build. No one's building this future, therefore I've got to go after it. So yeah, so I think there's a lot of, I guess, like responsibility in that sense to make sure that the technology that you're building actually embodies the values and everything that you claim to be wanting to build for people. But there's a lot of people who build technology today, they claim like social media claims to be about connection, but it's really about like addiction and getting you addicted to these platforms. And I feel like a lot of tech companies, that's there's this misalignment between what they claim to be and what they're actually building. And so that's why I feel like it's really important that companies like ours are obviously supported and continue on the mission that we're on.
Yeah, I love that. That's an awesome place for us to stop. I have so many more questions. Maybe we'll do another episode later this year, but I just want to say thank you so much for being on the show, Grace. This was great. I really enjoyed the conversation. So thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Greg. This was so much fun.
My pleasure. How can our listeners learn more about you and the company and follow along for everything you're doing?
I'd say LinkedIn is probably our primary platform of where we share things. Otherwise, if you go on our website, we have like a wait list if you're in an assisted living community looking to adopt an Abby, or just reach out to me personally, LinkedIn, Instagram, X. Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Well, we'll link all of those in the show notes, and keep following along for everything you guys are doing. Thanks again.
Thanks,